I have a
Okay.
question I'd like to put to everybody here, right? This is about the word sovereignty, right? Because we've got Sebastian, we've got people from all over here. Now, you all seem pretty well educated. We understand that sovereignty has changed its meaning throughout the ages, right? Originally, sovereignty meant the sovereign rights of kings, monarchs, and then it became the sovereign right of states. And then you had the emergence of this concept of the sovereignty of the people. It seems to me that when Ukrainian commentators on the YouTube start talking about the orcs, right, from Russia, they lose like most of the modern world, right? From everywhere, especially throughout Asia and the rest of it. Like, I've got Vietnamese friends, they don't like hearing that kind of language, right? They really don't. Nobody does, right? Even from countries like my country, Australia, where we committed gross genocides, right? And as guilty as anybody historically. I don't believe in historical guilt, but even here, it's not acceptable to talk that way. And when people are using the word sovereignty with regard to Ukraine, the sovereignty of the people who live in Crimea, the sovereignty of the people, not the state, right? And the sovereignty of the people in Donbass is invisible. It seems like we're back in the Middle Ages. We're talking about the sovereignty of the king of Ukraine or something, or the sovereignty of states. So I wonder about like this argument about sovereignty. It's like, are we talking about the sovereignty of people, or are we talking about the sovereignty of states? Because one is a lot.
It's about the sovereignty of the people in the new UN Charter 1 in paragraph 2. It talks about. It states about the self-determination of the people, not of the state, not of like the king.
That's right. We've moved on.
Maybe we agree on this paragraph or not, but that's the law, and you cannot escape it if you consider yourself to go in accordance to the international law.
I have one example, kind of example is like the Solomon Islands is like I think a year ago, where the Solomon Islands were trying to sign a peace, like a defense, like some kind of defense treaty with China, and then Australia and New Zealand were saying that's I forgot what they were trying to say, but they said that was not in their interest, and they didn't really respect the Solomon Islands sovereign right to choose whether they want to join China or not. But that's one of the examples. I feel like like how NATO and Russia and all of the other countries like want to look into their own interests. Like how the United States wants to weaken Russia as their adversary. They want to like bleed it, like at least so it won't be able to fight. For some years and all that. And sort of like China wants to become the dominant Pacific power in Asia, and that's one of their interests. And like there's a lot of countries that like have their own interests and goals. It doesn't really matter whether they're insulting your sovereignty. They just want to go for it. So basically, it's basically human history. People invade each other and people disagree. It's like.
Manny, sorry for interjecting, but I just wondered, do people around here, would you think it would be conducive to kind of distinguish between a sovereign state and a sovereign people? Because, like any example, really, you can have a sovereign state, they take their own decisions, but then we come to something a little bit more confusing, like Ukraine, where you have like people wanting their own sovereignty independent of the state and so forth. And, back to what Toby were talking about, they kind of like, what is sovereignty? I think it's like, I think we can all kind of agree that...
Well, who is sovereign? Who is sovereign? The monarch sovereign or are the people sovereign?
We'll take an example.
The people...
We can take an example, for example, the Crimea and this area in the Ukraine, right? So, like, in principle, we can probably agree to some extent that Russia is correct at going through referendums for the people to decide their own sovereignty. But I'm sure most of us can also see, like, right through that there's far too many errors or flaws with that referendum to be considered legitimate. But as in the...
I don't agree.
Well, I would say so.
No, because
I
UN disagreed on that.
No, yeah, I don't know. I understand what you guys are saying, right? But if you want to make it indisputable, if Russia had all of the territories and they had all of the population actually voting in for it, there won't be any dispute. Now there is a dispute, and that way the sovereignty of the state becomes more relevant than the sovereignty of the people. Because yes, most people here probably did want to join Russia given the choice of Russia or Ukraine. But did they have if they had a realistic choice of, for example,
they had the Minsk. Sorry for interrupting, but they had the Minsk agreements, okay, and also the Donetsk Republic accused Russia of not wanting them to be part of Russia because Russia said autonomy inside the Ukraine. That was the initial discussion, but it was the Ukrainian that, in fact, rejected the Minsk agreements that they signed.
Sure. I'm not really getting into, like, I get what you're saying, and I would say you are correct. But my point is kind of more like, as we are trying to assess, like back to kind of what Toby were alluding to, what is sovereignty really like? Yeah, and in this is a great example, I would say, because there are obviously, like, you can say, like, yes, I would say it on this side mostly it is, and on that side mostly, but it isn't clear cut. And it's very hard to kind of be like, here being like an armchair expert and stating this would be the legitimate, this would be the illegitimate. We are not even the people living there and generally have to deal with this. So like, but the people there, are they actually given a fair choice? Because I would consider it a false duality to have like, and this is through the intercessions of, to a large extent, the West, not really allowing for any diplomatic solutions, with Russia either, makes it for that the people living there in the East Ukraine, they have basically just two options. They cannot be their own state, really. They cannot be autonomous or their own state. They have to join Russia or Ukraine. And considering the history of the civil war, obviously going back to Ukraine, like I certainly would not be one of those who would go for that. But Russia is also, it has its issues. I'm not pretty sure there are quite a lot of Ukrainians there that would think like, yeah, I'm very appreciative that they came and helped us. They've defended us, but do I really want to be a part of this huge juggernaut? Like, am I really more free and have more sovereignty when I'm suddenly incorporated into this massive, the biggest nation in the world? So it's
which is hugely corrupt. If we're Sebastian, what do you think of the concept of sovereignty? Because, like, the Europeans, they developed a lot of this thought, and I know, you guys have complex thoughts on this. So speak, man.
To be honest, sovereignty is, sovereignty of the people in a state, but you have to break it down to some extent, because if you say every part of the people has its own sovereignty, then you have to abandon the notion of a nation state, basically. Because if I got you correctly, or I think what you tried to tell me, then you put forward the notion that Donbas people decided they no longer wanted to be part of Ukraine, something like that. But to some extent, if you live in a democracy, you have to accept the notion that sometimes you're not in the majority. Sometimes you have to bow to the majority. You can't, if you want to live in a nation state, and we have to, that's basically not negotiable, because if you don't, good luck surviving. You have to accept that you're not everything you want is going to be put through, is my notion on this.
So how do you feel about?
However, that's why the minorities are protected.
What about Kosovo?
You have to protect the minorities.
No, the state comes first. I think this is a historical conflict, right? I think it's one of those verbs where, like, if I want to break up your state and take part of it for myself and balkanize it, well, then it's the sovereignty of the people all day. But if someone's trying to do that to me, it's the sovereignty of the nation state, you understand, and we all have to make sacrifices. So I think this is this is a very flexible notion, sovereignty. And this is why I think, it's not a strong argument. The argument for the Ukrainian side is that's our land. And the argument from the Russians is those are our people, right? The people are going to win.
And in both
The
cases,
thing
there
is,
the
thing is
sovereignty
that
isn't,
the common language is the international law, and the international law it's
But the
very vague
people
in
decided
this
that they
aspect.
did want to be part of Russia.
Sorry?
The notion of claiming that those are our people is, I'm sorry, but that's bullshit. If I
might
claim
be,
that
but that's the
Ukrainians and
argument.
Kherson are my people, and
Well, it's
those
bullshit
other
to say
guys
it's
are
their
Nazis,
land.
and I'm
I'm not
annexed,
arguing
you
the
are
truth,
send
Sebastian.
run
You
I'm
away.
are
saying
missing
these are the
8
arguments,
years,
right?
but you are missing 8 years. They were alone for 8 years.
No, look, Sebastian makes a good point. You can't just accept the Russian position, but I'm not arguing the truth, Sebastian. I'm saying this is the lexicon that both sides have chosen. The Ukrainians are making the argument that that is our land. The Russians are making the argument that those are our people. Now, whether or not it's true, these are the things that have been said again and again and again and again. And what do we do when we hear things again and again? We believe it, right? Because that's what
Whether
we're
or
like.
not that's what they claim.
Okay, let me
Where we
put a
choose to
question.
decide on what we want to do, on what the other wants to do. And the Russians claim those are our people, and we annex their oblasts to make them those people that are part of our ethnicity, and integrate them into our country. And at the first sign of trouble, I'm leaving most of the population behind. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty damn sure that's not a good argument for anyone else who might want to join, probably not anymore, my country.